Welcome to Grab Your Gear. I am Joe, and we did, of course, a abbreviated Grab Your Gear yesterday with Apprentice Isabella, and we did it because our normal visitor, our contributor to Grab Your Gear, Jack Windsor, editor-in-chief and founder of the Ohio Press Network and host of the Jack Windsor Report, was sucking Pedialyte and laying with a blanket in shivering conditions in his bed. Apparently, you've recovered a little bit. Jack, how are you
Yeah,
feeling today?
I feel much better. Still a little bit of a scratchy throat, but I took some emergency yesterday, rested, took some good vitamins, and I'm definitely on the mend.
Did you go to your speak at your panel you were supposed to go to last night?
I did. I rested throughout the day with the hope of having enough energy and gumption to uh, participate in an hour and a half panel. We discussed issue one, what's in it, who's backing it, what's going to happen if it passes. So it was very beneficial and it was pretty well attended.
And issue one is a redistricting, anti-gerrymandering, whatever you want to call it, proposal that is in the state of Ohio, right?
That's correct. Actually,
Okay.
it would, the proponents say that it would eliminate gerrymandering when in fact it would enshrine into the state constitution the right to gerrymander. And it's backed by the usual suspects, the left wing dark money groups.
Yeah, I hear it's going to pass in Ohio.
Well, it's going to be close. If you get the people who are maybe soft Republicans that don't always turn out to vote, I think there's an opportunity to defeat it. But they have millions and millions and millions of dollars, and they've just flipped. The people who want it to pass, just flipped the switch on advertising on September 17th. So Ohioans are going to see
Okay.
these ads all over their TV and hear them all over the radio.
Okay, and before we get into our topic today, which is Springfield, Ohio, Jack, you're in a documentary series that gets released tomorrow, I believe. Can you tell
Yeah.
us a little bit about it and where people can find it?
Sure. It's called The Union Hustle, and it's a five-part miniseries on the power of organized labor and the consequences of that movement here in America. Now, I want to point out it's not necessarily an anti-union program, but it is a study on the waste and corruption that touch every single taxpayer here in Ohio and throughout the United States. What I've learned, Joe, in my work on this project is that merit shop people and union people can actually coexist. It doesn't have to be the way that it is right now.
Mhm.
I'm excited about it, grateful to have worked on it, and can't wait to share it with the world tomorrow.
Good. Goes up tomorrow morning on all kinds of platforms. You'll have it on yours. And I think Apprentice Isabella is going to work directly with you to make sure you have the first link since you're in it. So
That's right. Yeah, it'll be on the Ohio Press Network, and then all of my socials: X at Jack Windsor,
great.
Facebook Jack Windsor Investigative Reporter.
I think the one thing, and we'll get into Springfield one second. After $90 billion bailout to union pensions, I'm anxious to see the project. Let me put it that way. 90. Remember that? That was the economic recovery thing.
That's
$90
right.
billion of those of us who aren't in pensions. Anyhow, good work on that, Jack. Hey, okay,
Thank you.
so let's get back to what you're doing. Social media, you have a lot of clips on you, and Apprentice Isabella have been in Springfield. If I had to ask you, like in a nutshell, when you first went to Springfield, what were you expecting to find? And now that you've been kind of going back and forth a little bit, what have you found?
I wasn't sure what I was going to find, frankly. I was driven by curiosity. Number one, it's in my backyard, figuratively, but it's here in the Buckeye State. Number two, I have done enough reading over the past couple of years to know that there were migrants there in large numbers. And for the better part of this year, we've known that almost 20,000 people had descended on or come to Springfield. And because the presidential election has a couple of hot button topics that are really driving voters, one is the economy and inflation, and the second is immigration and then crime. This seemed to be one of those places where it's kind of a microcosm of probably what's going on all over the country. And what really kind of put my heart over the bar to get there was the controversial language that was used in the debate, Donald Trump and then J.D. Vance echoing it, saying, they're eating cats, they're eating dogs. And a lot of people have a lot of theories about why he went that way and why he used that angle. But I wanted to just see what was going on. I figured it would be a little bit chaotic. I figured it would be tense. That was really kind of what I thought going in. And what I discovered is what we're reading on headlines or in headlines in newspapers, what we're hearing on mainstream TV stations really is not accurate. There were times that we were there that it felt like you were in an everyday community, but certainly talking with both the Haitian migrants and the longtime residents of Springfield, we were able to uncover a lot of information that, frankly, other press outlets aren't talking about. The one outlet that did talk about it, the New York Times, really kind of glossed over all of the issues that are threatening that community and kind of wrapped it all up and tied a bow of, there's economic prosperity, so let's hold hands and sing kumbaya. And the community is not there yet.
Okay, so set the stage a little bit. Springfield, Ohio is a town that has a little bit of manufacturing in it, I believe. Also is is it north of Dayton, or I guess east of
Yeah,
Dayton?
kind of between, try thinking between Dayton and Columbus.
Okay, so
So, yeah,
off of 70, if for
70.
those of you who travel across the country, and all of a sudden, it didn't happen like yesterday, but there's been an influx of Haitians into the area. So the community, how big is the community?
So the 2020 census was 58,000 and change.
Okay, then
So
how many Haitians have come?
the estimate is 20,000, and I get that number from a letter that was written. That's the high end of the estimate. We've actually heard people say it might be more than that. But the city manager wrote a letter to two senators earlier this year and said over the past 4 years, we've reached a level of 20,000, up to 20,000 Haitians in our community.
So they've almost, I mean, 50% increase in population, I mean,
Uh,
relatively speaking.
For all intents and purposes, yeah, that is exactly what it sounds like.
What's
And
been the period of time that this has happened?
so, based on what officials are saying, based on things that we're reading, most of this has happened in the past 3 to 4 years. Now, you can go all the way back to 2010 during that devastating earthquake that rocked Haiti, and Haitians were given temporary protected status in the United States. And so some of the Haitians started to come here. Now, the Obama, by the way, temporary protected status is supposed to last 6 to 18 months. The Obama administration extended those protections quite a bit, obviously, through the Obama years. And then when Trump came into office, his goal was ultimately to wind that down. And in fact, he released an executive order that said a couple of things. He was going to cap the number of migrants at 18,000. I want you to think about that. He's capping it at 18,000, and there are already 20,000 in Springfield. So quite a juxtaposition. Number two, he was going to ask governors in every state to sign a letter of intent to say, or to opt in and say, look, we'll accept some migrants. But his message was very clear. You need to get ready to go home because TPS, temporary protected status, is just that. It's temporary. Well, as you can imagine, there were people who were opposed to that. So they sued and they won. And the judge that stopped the order said essentially that Donald Trump is a racist. So, that's kind of the beat of the drum we've heard for years now. And when Biden came into office, he created temporary protected status again for Haitians. They've extended. That's due to run out in February of 2026. But and this is the big deal. The Biden administration also created this parole program, and it's CHVN. So Cubans, Haitians, Venezuelans, Nicaraguans are able to come to the United States, and they're able to do so by being sponsored by somebody that's already here. So I did talk to Haitians when I was in Springfield. One Haitian man from Florida said, well, yeah, I've sponsored family members to come here. But the parole program also allows businesses, nonprofit organizations, and other entities to sponsor individuals and to bring them into the country. And we expect that that's probably where most of these Haitians are coming from, because one report that we stumbled upon indicated that there was only one Haitian who came into Springfield in the last year who was under that raw temporary protected status. So we're assuming that most of them have come through this CHVN program.
So when they come from that CHVA program, whatever, does that mean they're just relocating from where they were in the United States to Springfield, or are they actually coming from Haiti?
Well, that's a great question, right? And this is the challenge. The press has made this about dogs and cats and racism and xenophobia, and it is so complex. There are so many layers and levels here, and I'm sure we'll talk about some of them. But it appears some of them are coming from Haiti. We've also heard that there are Haitians being trucked up from Florida, uh, but it is intended to be parole, a 2-year parole program. So there should be an end date to it, and it is so challenging and fraught with risk and potential fraud that the Biden administration actually pumped the brakes on it in July. But when I talked to Congressman Jim Jordan last week, he said that they've actually re-upped the program.
You interviewed him. Did you put that out on social media? Is that interview available somewhere if people want to hear it? Because
It is. If you want to go to X, if you want to go to Facebook, Grab Your Gear. You can go to the Grab Your Gear network on X. You can go to the Jack Windsor on X, and it's a nice short video of Jim Jordan and I having a conversation.
I assume that's also on your Facebook, Jack Windsor Facebook.
Facebook, yep, absolutely.
Okay.
And the Ohio Press Network will publish all of those individually in the next 5 to 6 days. The goal is to have short, digestible bits of information, because again, Joe, this is so complex. There are so many layers. There are so many implications. We really want to slow walk this a little bit so that people can have time to absorb what's really going on, and they're not going to get that information anywhere else.
Okay, I want to ask you a couple of things, and then just because I want to tighten this up. So I'm going to give you some. This isn't going to cover everything that's going on in Springfield,
Okay.
but there's always unintended consequences when people do this crap. I assume there are NGOs that are kind of behind this, because I doubt HUD is moving people around, or the Department of Energy. So if you had to, in a nutshell, explain who actually is doing this, and of course NGO stands for non-governmental organization, is that who is operating? And if they are they doing it through charity? Are they getting grants through the government to do this? Do you have any sense of that? Who's actually moving the people around and how they funded it?
So that's a great question. So when you say non-government organization, those are entities that pop up, right? And they have really good sounding names. Let's say Welcome Springfield would be one. Welcome Springfield is actually the name of an organization.
Love Not Hate. That's another one of my favorite NGOs.
Exactly. So, but when you go back into how Welcome Springfield was established, as Glenn Beck always talks about, it all kind of leads back to George Soros, and it does. So the Open Society, which is the group that has taken billions of dollars from Soros, has funded this group called, or at least help establish this group called Welcome Springfield. We were able to see a city resolution that passed, I want to say circa 2014, that essentially said Springfield is going to join Dayton and Columbus in being a welcoming community for migrants from all over the world. And so you have organizations like that, and they are funded by billionaires. They are funded by these left-leaning dark money groups. I would also suspect that they're getting federal grants at times. So the NGOs and, Catholic Charities is a big one in that area. St. Vincent de Paul is a big one in that area. St. Bernard is another church organization that actually we're starting to understand had printed, this is alleged, had printed some voter registration forms in Creole, which is not permissible. But so you have those agencies or those non-government organizations, but we've also uncovered, and this is the really interesting part, we've also uncovered that there are organizations like staffing agencies that are helping accommodate the transfer of migrants to the community, and then they are plugging them into certain aspects of that community, meaning they are placing them in work, not as full-time employees with, say, Dole or a manufacturer metal company there, but the staffing company employs them and then gives them essentially as assigned labor to these organizations. They're also getting housing from some of these same players that are employing them in other companies. They're getting money cards that are refilled by some taxpayer dollars. They are getting housing vouchers paid for by taxpayer dollars. Governor Mike DeWine just threw another $2.5 million into Springfield, Ohio, saying that it would increase the capacity of primary care facilities there. And so there's a ton of money. And what we, Joe, if I could, I know I'm really long-winded on this, but there's an essence here that I think we need to uncover. But I'll pause right there because I think that we have, when you think about an octopus that has all of these different arms, you kind of go right back to that center, right? And I think we've uncovered the center. But that what I just explained kind of goes all the way around the edges. But I want to pause right there and give you a chance to ask any questions. If I glossed over something, please let me know.
Okay, no. So you're on the right track. So I'll come back to the governor in a minute. What's been the effect when you've been over there? What have you talked to people about the effect on some basic things like schools?
Oh
Like,
man, yeah, schools, shelters, uh, housing market. But let's start with schools. 1,600 non-English speaking students have been brought in to the school district. 1,600 in a district of 8,000. And
jeez.
so families that we talked with said, by the way, there's a lot of love for the Haitian migrants there. There's also a lot of frustration because there's this feeling of not being prepared, not being resourced, not being told what's really going on, how long it's going to go on. But we talked with one family, and they have a daughter in 8th grade, and the daughter said, I love these kids, but they don't speak English. They can't receive instruction in English. And so you
Right.
think about that, right? There's an opportunity cost. Every minute that you spend trying to instruct somebody that doesn't understand the language, you're bypassing the opportunity to teach all of the other students. So it has a tremendous impact on our schools and their resources, by the way, just raw resources. Uh, we talked to one gentleman who runs a soup kitchen there, and his concern is as we get into these winter months, there have been a lot of residents that are displaced and they're not Haitian residents. And I kind of thought, well, why is that? And so this gentleman actually told us a story on camera. He said that he knows a guy who is a veteran, a disabled veteran. He said he didn't want to buy a house because he didn't want to deal with mowing the grass and all the upkeep. So he rented. And his rent was raised to a level that he couldn't afford. So he was evicted. And you go, well, why are they raising rents? Well, one of the things that they are doing is they are allowing migrants by large numbers, say 5, 10, 15, maybe even 20, to be in one unit. And in some instances, we're hearing stories. I've not been able to get into one of the units yet, but we've heard firsthand accounts and secondhand accounts enough that New York Times wrote about it. So we know that it's happening. But what's happening is these migrants are getting, say, $250. They're paying a landlord to have a bunk or to have a bed. Well, when you spread that across 10 or 20, that is a huge revenue stream for these landlords. And so they go, well, wait a minute, do I want to rent this place out for 600 or do I want to rent it out for 2,500? So that has created, there was already a shortage. In 2018, there was a research project done there because there was already a little bit of a shortage. And in the past few years, the number of migrants has only exponentially grown. So there's a housing shortage, but then there's also a spike in rents. The other thing that we've seen that it's really intriguing how the press wants to deal with this. I say the press, we are the press, but the traditional mainstream press, I would consider us independent brokers of news and information. But the roadways are not as safe as they were 5 years ago. And you go, well, why is that? Because you have migrant drivers who, and I want you to get this, in the state of Ohio, in order to get a driver's license, if you're over 18, you don't have to go through the driver's education courses that you and I went through, Joe. So a Haitian migrant can go to the Bureau of Motor Vehicles with a Creole interpreter get the form, talk to the Creole interpreter, and we suspect the Creole interpreter is probably filling it out and getting the right answers for the person. So the person cannot speak English, cannot read the traffic signs, and then all of a sudden has a driver's license and goes out onto the roadways.
Road
And
trip.
yeah,
Gosh.
so it has created
Where they get in the cars? I mean, if you're a migrant, you got your license, that's fine, but you have to have access to a car. I mean, a car is
well,
kind of expensive,
cars
or
are
can be.
expensive. Yeah, they can be expensive. And so again, this is one of those layers that we're trying to peel, the layer of that onion back. There are dealerships there that are hooking, certain workers up with cars, and I don't know if it's like those pay every week type of programs, or if they're paying for them with a lease. And I don't even know if there's government subsidy involved at this point in buying transportation or leasing transportation.
Okay, so what? And I got to move on because
Yeah.
we're going to run long here today. But real quick, where do they work?
So they work, and this is like the question. I interviewed Bernie Marino last week, and he said, Jack, you're telling me that 20,000 Haitian migrants came to Springfield, Ohio, and they're all working? He said the Intel project in Ohio employs 3,000. He said, so are they all working, or are many of them sitting at home and getting government benefits, basically taxpayer benefits? And by the way, I will point out that Springfield's poverty rate is much higher than the national average. So they're already struggling for resources. But those that are working at manufacturing companies. Many of them, according to our research, are working for staffing agencies, and those staffing agencies are putting them to work for other companies. So let's say Dole is a big employer there. Dole will contract with the staffing agency. The staffing agency might, supply 100 or 200 workers at, X amount, and the staffing company then makes, whatever their markup is on each person, each hour of each day.
Okay.
And if it's first shift, second shift, third shift. So the staffing companies are making out pretty well on this. Um, you know, and I said that there's kind of the crux of this. Here's the crux of it, Joe. 5 years ago, let's go back 10 to 15 years ago, offshoring was pretty popular, right?
Yeah.
But companies got clobbered with that because Americans went, we don't want you building facilities in other countries and employing cheap labor there. We want you to employ Americans. Well, the way that the Biden-Harris administration, we talked about that the parole program language, the way that it's written, the people that are allowed to come here right now, it's Cuba, Haiti, Venezuela, and Nicaragua. But the way that that is written, it could apply to any third world country. So they're opening the border. We know there are between 10 and 15 million migrants who have come to America. And when I look at what's going on in Springfield, I just had an aha moment. I went, oh, we're not offshoring anymore. We're bringing the cheap labor here. And it's still cheap labor. And in this instance, it's cheap labor coupled by the fact that they're getting, free health. They're getting magic cards, or what the Haitians call the debit cards. They're getting money every month. They're getting a housing subsidy. So we're not offshoring. We're just bringing the cheap labor here.
Oh, okay. So, but behind that staffing, and Apprentice Isabella brought this to my attention. First Diversity Staffing is the primary staffer there. Is that who you identified?
That's who we identified as one of the primary. Yes, that is
Okay.
correct.
If this report's true, he's being investigated. The head of it is being investigated for human trafficking.
So I want to be very careful here. The person. So I've been working kind of hand in glove with a woman by the name of Uzra Nomani. Uzra Nomani released a report in the Jewish Journal, and she details all of this
Just so people know,
information.
former Wall Street Journal reporter. Okay.
That's right.
Yes.
And so our paths crossed. We've been kind of comparing notes. She claims that what's going on there is being investigated by the FBI and the Ohio Attorney General. I've reached out to the Ohio Attorney General. I asked, are you investigating the companies or the situations in Springfield, particularly this one staffing company? And the response I got back was, we can neither confirm nor deny that there is an investigation. I will tell you, I've done some additional research and talked to other staffing companies. One of those folks that I talked with seems to have a very good pulse on the community. My conversation with that person yesterday revealed that there are investigations, but we don't think that anything is going to hit until after the election. So mid-November is probably when all of this will hit the fan.
Why do they always wait till after the election?
They want to avoid the appearance of election interference because in this case, it really is the Harris-Biden border policy that got us into this situation. And by the way, I want to be very careful and say, in my talking with other staffing companies, they go, is what's going on illegal? Eh, but it certainly feels unethical because we're hearing uh, these certain staffing companies are creating documents for migrant workers and they're charging those workers for the documents and saying, it's okay, don't worry, we'll take it out of your paycheck. By the way, we have housing if you need it. And they're hot bunks. So I work third shift. When I come in, the guy that works first shift is leaving the bunk. And so, they're kind of like doubling, maybe tripling up on some of these bunks. Um,
Ugh.
it's almost, it has a feel like the old company store. You think about those mine
Yeah.
towns. It really feels a lot like that. Is that illegal? I don't know. But it's certainly not what the press is reporting. And when the New York Times reported on it, again, they glossed over it like, hey, it's an economic boon. So, it'll all work out, man. And that's not how people there feel.
Okay. Just to make sure people know, Dole is the company we're talking. That's Dole, the food company, correct? Dole
Correct.
pineapple or whatever. Okay.
Yep. Yep.
And they obviously have some sort of facility over there. Okay. Last thing.
Yeah.
Vivek Ramaswamy, a friend of yours, does a town hall there, which all I'm going to do is I'm going to say, I saw your social media tweet on X that said the governor is not pleased that Vivek Ramaswamy was hosting a town hall in Springfield.
I have direct sources that said when Vivek said he was doing the town hall, Mike DeWine was not happy. And my first thought was, well, why the hell is the mayor not doing a town hall? Why the hell is the governor not doing a town hall? And the question I get a lot was,
Anybody, the
well,
sheriff, superintendent of schools. I mean, there's
somebody.
a lot of people that could be doing a town hall. Sorry.
And the question no, don't be sorry. The question, I've been talking a lot
No,
and
you're
I
fine.
apologize. It's so fresh here. There's so much. So I know
Yeah.
it's probably like drinking from a fire hose. But the thing that I get asked is, well, what did you think of the town hall? I think it was superb in that it did what needs to be done in this country. Because when you look at outside of that town hall, it's either been you're on Trump's side or you're not. And if you're on Trump's side, you're a xenophobe and you're a racist. And if you're not on Trump's side, then you love the Haitians. Well, I can say that there are many people I've talked to in Springfield who love the Haitians, but think they're getting a raw deal, think that they're being taken advantage of and exploited, in addition to all the challenges that are being created for the locals there. But I've said this, it exposed. Vivek's town hall exposed. It exposed the issues and it also exposed the people in power because I think the bigger concern here is Springfield is America. This is going on all over the country. And my guess would be some of these political leaders are looking out and going, okay, we have businesses that are employing migrants, cheap labor, they're being productive, and we're going to just ride that wave and call it a win. And there's a lot that has to happen in order for that to be a win. And there is a certain amount of respect that's not being extended by Governor DeWine, by the mayor of that community. And I think there was even one business leader in that community who said, "Oh, well, I prefer the Haitian workers. They come in, they show up, they don't give me a problem, they're productive." And you go, well, that sounds a little racist because I'm certain that there are other workers there locally that do a good job. But when DeWine and the mayor come out and basically say, "Look, don't talk negatively about these Haitians," and if you do bring up an issue, they gaslight you and say, "Well, it's because they're brown skinned." I mean, there's just so much innuendo. It's really disgusting, and it doesn't deal with the real raw issues of Springfield.
Remember the Clinton Foundation? They raised like $1 billion for Haiti. Wonder where that money went.
Well, I think you're probably looking at some of it.
That was my point. You picked it up. Jack Windsor, thanks, Jack. So before we wrap up, you're doing some more stories, posting to social media. I assume you're putting a plan together to decide what's next. I mean, where are you on this story, and how long does it go?
Great question, Joe. So, 98.9 FM, The Answer is where I have my radio show. I will have Uzra Nomani with me tomorrow. She's going to unpack the latest that she's discovered there. She's still boots on the ground there. I'm going back, but she's been there for 3 weeks solid. So she's going to give us the latest that she's discovered, and then I think we're going to co-work on a story together. We have some more videos coming out. This will actually turn into a docu miniseries because what's going on, Springfield is America. And the issues in Springfield,
Yeah.
if they are addressed in other communities the way that they were addressed in Springfield, we're missing the boat.
Jack Windsor, editor-in-chief of the Ohio Press Network and host of the Jack Windsor Reports radio show. So they can get people can get that online. They can also get your stuff on Facebook and all the social media platforms. Also, go to Grab Your Gear for all the video. We're kind of helping, and we're doing some of this together. You've taken Apprentice Isabella over there. She's thinking of moving to Springfield. Enjoyed it so much. So
Are we going to hear from her at all? By the way, I know
we had a whole segment with her yesterday. She blah
Okay,
blah
good.
blah. It was just everything.
Okay.
Springfield this, Springfield that.
Okay.
No,
Okay,
no, we heard from her. Set you up today. Anyhow, we will stay on top of it, and of course, we'll talk to you again next Tuesday, Jack. Appreciate it. Appreciate all the work you're doing, and we appreciate you, our audience. I am Joe. This is Grab Your Gear. We appreciate more than ever you helping us build this network as well as we try to bring you content, information, and news that you can't get anywhere else. So follow us on social media and our other YouTube platform and other places we are. Just go to grabyourgear.net, check out our website. And if you have any information, suggestions, or if you're in Springfield and you want us to follow something, go ahead and just shoot Dick an email, dick@grabyourgear.net. He handles our content planning and production planning. He will address the situation. In the meantime, talk to you next week. For Apprentice Isabella, Jack Windsor, I am Joe. We'll see you later.